Energy expert Ted Blom joins us now to talk a little bit more about some of these. Ted, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. As you may have heard me read some of those units that have come back on, but that some are pretty much out of commission for a period of a year. Should we be frightened? And I say frightened, you saw there was that protest calling on Eskom to be more forthcoming, transparent about the current situation.
No, absolutely. I think there is a very strong reason for concern, and more so because I also attended that press briefing this afternoon, and it seems to me, and I can't explain it, but it's something that's endemic in Eskom's DNA, is that there's a lack of urgency. And I think if I remember correctly, the outgoing CEO complained about exactly that sort of lack of urgency in the culture of Eskom that he experienced as an outsider. And one would have thought that given the dire situation in our economy, the loss of jobs, et cetera, that there would have been a higher sense of urgency in tackling the rolling blackouts. But for Eskom, it seems to be just business as usual.
And I'm just wondering, when there are maintenance plans, how much does that take off the grid? I'm looking at a figure that puts it at something like 6,482 megawatts, the average amount taken off the grid during planned maintenance. But what about breakdowns? That's something that's also probably very difficult to anticipate, but must have a huge impact.
Absolutely. The breakdowns as this afternoon was at 17,000 megawatts. So that's nearly 40% of Eskom's book capacity. The other thing is that what Eskom hasn't been transparent about is how many megawatts they've actually closed down. They closed down 1,000 megawatts at Komati Power Station, and in total, with the various units down at various stations, there's over 8,000 megawatts that is out of service seemingly permanently. And that's because of early shutdowns of coal stations in accordance with the Biden administration's declaration or wishes or announcements. I'm very concerned that Eskom and the government are dancing to the tunes of the renewable energy lobby in America and in Europe, and prematurely closing down power stations. Both those countries or geographic locations are claiming victory in the battle against coal. Yet they are using coal more extensively themselves than ever before. So it seems to me they're different horses for different courses. And it's not transparent, and it's not a just transition as far as I can see. We're bearing the brunt for past sins of the first world economy.
I mean, I'd want to stay away from conspiracy theories, but I'd like to hear from you. What do you think is behind, as what you say, government singing to the tune of the renewable energy lobby groups and shutting down units that could still provide us with energy?
Well, I mean, I want to take you to two instances. Firstly, the units that are being recommissioned in Germany, on average, older than the fleet that Eskom is busy decommissioning. So the excuse from Eskom's side that the fleet is old and needs to be decommissioned is absolute nonsense, because in Germany, as I said, the fleet that they're recommissioning is older. Secondly, earlier on this week, our state president announced at a meeting in KwaZulu-Natal that he had told his compatriots overseas that there's no way that Eskom and South Africa is going to be closing down any coal power stations. That was sentence one. Sentence two was that we need to acknowledge that the stations are old and need to be closed down as soon as possible. Now, I mean, if the president speaks with a forked tongue, then what does we as a public believe?
Speaking of coal-fired stations, you mentioned Andre de Ruyter earlier on. He had previously said that Eskom has been hit with the perfect storm. Perhaps let's just start there. What are the issues, and do you agree with him that, perfect storm, I suppose it just depends on from which end you see it, whether it's something that is beyond your control or not?
Well, I think it's just another excuse. If I can just take you to three areas. I mean, the first area that's causing a lot of problems with Eskom is the quality of the coal. That is of their own making. I was part of a committee that in 2006 to 2008 identified coal shortages as a problematic area. Brian Damas took that report and said he would open up 40 new coal mines. We only suggested 20 new coal mines. To date, Eskom has opened up 0 new coal mines. So that's the first storm of their own making. The second thing is that the maintenance is now underfunded, and you heard that if you were at the conference this afternoon, Eskom complaining that they can't order parts timelessly and order planned maintenance timelessly, because some of the parts have a lead time of up to 2 years, and they don't have a budget to allocate so far in advance. So they can't order these parts because they have to pay deposits because they don't have the liquidity. The same CEO who's now complaining about the perfect storm accelerated debt repayments to the tune of 82 billion rand in the last quarter of last year. That 82 billion rand could have gone far in sorting out the maintenance budget and the refurbishment budget. So, as far as I can see, complaining about a perfect storm is just an excuse.
And it's interesting because he spoke about a lack of liquidity constrained finances at the company, which prevented it from operating things like open cycle gas turbines, which he says ultimately could help reduce the load shedding.
Absolutely. I mean, I've just looked at the cost of Eskom's latest financials that have come out. Their cost of running the OCGTs is around about 4 rand a kilowatt hour. And yes, it is expensive compared to the coal cost, which is around about 52 cents a kilowatt hour on the grid. But it doesn't come anywhere near the renewable cost. The renewable cost of the bid window 1 is over 5 rand a kilowatt hour, and Eskom gladly pays that money to these IPPs every month.
Ted, thank you so much for speaking to us, energy expert Ted Blom, speaking to us about the current situation at Eskom.